Okay, so you want to own a Byzantine silk workshop. Looms clattering from dawn to dark, gold thread catching the lamplight, purple dye worth more than the building, emperors and bishops lined up outside your door. Except here's the real rule this business ran under, written down in Constantinople in the early 900s. Sell silk under your own name to the wrong patron and it's not a fine. It's flogging, a shaved head, and the end of your career for helping a rich man skip a step. The purple was never for sale. The permission was. And when this system finally broke centuries later, the people who got rich weren't the weavers. They were the ones who showed up with an army and just took the looms. Let's kill the sword shop version of this first. No, wait, wrong video. Let's kill the free artisan version of this. You are picturing one shop, one owner, one craftsman who buys silk, dyes it, weaves it, and sells you a finished robe. That business does not exist in Constantinople. It's illegal. The Book of the Eparch splits silk into 5 separate, legally walled-off guilds, and you are only ever allowed to belong to one of them. The metaxopratai buy raw silk in bulk and resell it, but they are forbidden from touching it. No spinning, no dyeing, no weaving. The katartarioi take that raw silk and dress and spin it into thread. This one's interesting. The guild is open to women, which tells you it wasn't seen as some prestige craft. It was skilled, grinding labor. The serikarioi weave and dye the actual cloth. The vestiopratai sell finished silk garments to the public, and the othoniopratai import linen and foreign silk for lining and trim. 5 guilds, 5 legally separate businesses sitting on the same street and forbidden from combining into one. And the entire point of splitting it this way is that no single person can ever own the whole chain. You can get rich at any one link. You cannot become the man who controls the whole rope. That's not an accident of bureaucracy. That's the state's business model. So before you spend a single coin, understand the shape of the cage you're building inside. And that cage only covers the private side of the business. Sitting apart from all 5 guilds, inside the palace grounds, are workshops the guild rules don't even apply to. They're called the gynecia, staffed by workers who didn't choose this trade and can't leave it. Some of them enslaved, most of them born into families that have worked palace looms for generations. They make the emperor's own robes and the church's most valuable vestments. And none of it ever touches the market you're about to enter. You're not competing with the palace, you're operating in the space the palace decided to leave you. Now, let's actually build the shop. Say you're a serikarios, a weaver and dyer, opening in Constantinople in the 10th century. Your first cost is raw silk, and you're not buying it from a farm down the road. You're buying it in the forum, at a stall where the scale has to be stamped with the eparch's own seal, or the whole sale is illegal. The seller is a metaxopritz, and he pays a guild fee for the privilege, 1 kuration, a 24th of a gold nomisma, for every kantar of raw silk that passes through his hands, roughly $170 in today's money. That fee gets baked into what you pay. Then there's your equipment, looms, dye vats, the tools of dressing and finishing cloth. Then there's the dye itself. Walk toward the part of the district where the purple gets made and you smell it before you see it. It's a thick, rotting, fishy stink that a Roman poet was still joking about a century later, one that made an entire city, by a geographer's own account, miserable to live near. Thousands of crushed sea snails, salted, then cooked slowly for days in a vat, the smell soaking into the walls, into your clothes, into your hands. One old legal tradition on record actually let a wife divorce her husband if he took up dyeing after the wedding. Somewhere in the historical record is a Byzantine woman who married a promising young merchant and ended up with a dye worker instead, and the law took her side immediately. That's what you're buying into, for a few grams of pigment. And even after all of that, some grades of the very color you just spent a fortune stinking up the district to make are flat out illegal for you to touch. We don't have a clean receipt that says 1 workshop, total cost X nomismata, the way we do for a Roman villa or an English manor. While Byzantine bureaucrats kept meticulous records of flogging penalties, they were shockingly careless with startup budgets. Says a lot about their priorities. Anyway, what we do have is a value line drawn right through the middle of this business. The Book of the Eparch requires any cloak worth more than 10 nomismata to be declared to the city prefect. 10 nomismata. Call that around $40,000 in today's money. An ordinary unskilled worker in this period earned somewhere around 10 to 12 nomismata in an entire year. That's around $40,000 to $48,000, give or take. So the moment your workshop produces one really good cloak, You have just made an object worth more than a full year of a common laborer's life, and the state wants to know about it. This isn't a business making shirts. It's a business turning a year of someone's labor into thread in a few weeks, with the government watching very closely. And it's not just the state watching. Treaties prove foreign buyers were being watched too. One surviving Byzantine trade agreement with Russ's merchants visiting Constantinople caps how much silk any single one of them is allowed to buy. 50 bezants worth, no matter how much gold they're carrying. 50 bezants is 4 or 5 years of an ordinary worker's wages, somewhere around $200,000 spent on cloth, and the empire still felt the need to write a ceiling on it into a formal treaty. That's not a price, that's a permission slip with a number attached. You can't run this shop alone, obviously, so let's talk about who's in the building with you. If you hire a wage laborer, the rules are specific and a little brutal. You can only contract him 1 month at a time. You are not allowed to give him more than 1 month's pay up front. Pay him more and you personally bear the loss. The law erased the excess. Why write a rule that specific? Because somebody was already doing exactly this, trapping workers in debt 1 wage advance at a time, and the law showed up specifically to stop it. Your household absorbs the rest. Wives worked in this trade not as a footnote. The Qatar Tarioi, the spinner's own guild, name women as legitimate members outright. The same hand motion repeats for hours, raw silk drawn out thread by thread, until your fingers are rubbed raw by the end of the day. So, don't picture silk work as some closed men's guild with a wife serving wine in the corner. She's on the floor. Now, the actual raw material. Where does the silk come from before it ever reaches your workshop? For a long time, the empire had to buy all its silk from its main rival, the Persians, and pay whatever high price they demanded. Every war with Persia was also, quietly, a war over your supply chain. Steep duties in peacetime, dead roots the moment fighting breaks out. Before the war, Justinian tried to buy Indian silk from Aksum in Africa to bypass Persia. The plan failed. Persian merchants controlled the Indian ports too, and Aksum couldn't compete with that. And then, supposedly, that changed. You've probably heard the story. 2 monks smuggled silkworm eggs out of China, hidden inside hollow bamboo walking canes, brought them to Emperor Justinian, and single-handedly freed the empire from its silk dependency. Great story, mostly invented. Here's what the real source, the historian Procopius, writing in Justinian's own century, actually says. Some monks, he doesn't say two, he doesn't say Nestorian, he doesn't say China, he says a region called Serinda. They come to Justinian and explain that silk is made by worms, and that while the worms themselves can't survive the journey, their eggs can. The actual object changing hands here isn't silk and isn't thread. It's a handful of eggs smaller than grains of rice, packed into warm dung and checked every day for weeks. If that dung runs cold too soon or too hot, months of travel and the whole strategy dies quietly in someone's hands before a single thread ever gets spun. The monks go back, bring the eggs to Constantinople, and Procopius closes the story with one clean line. That's when the art of making silk began in the Roman Empire. No bamboo canes, no named heroes, no date. Historians who studied this closely will tell you the entire scene reads suspiciously like propaganda, a flattering story about a wise emperor solving a strategic problem through cleverness and generosity. It was written, after all, by a man whose job was partly to make Justinian look good. So even the founding myth of your raw material got polished on its way down to you, the same way every good legend does. Honestly, it's a decent preview of how the rest of this video is going to go, because almost everything about this business looks more romantic from a distance than it does up close. Alright, the eggs are real even if the canes probably aren't, so let's follow the silk from thread to profit, because this is where the real shape of the business shows up. The revenue ladder here runs weak to strong, same as it does in every business we've looked at. At the bottom is raw silk trading. Raw silk trading has thin profits because the Metaxopratai Guild sets a strict low-profit limit for sales between rich and poor members. Regardless of the quality you produce, you will still be selling into a chain, not to a final customer. Next up is trading woven and dyed cloth. This brings in real money, including ordinary silk clothes and patterned fabrics. This valuable stuff dresses rich homes in the empire and sells for a high price when exported. And then, right at the top, sitting there the whole time like the thing everyone was actually building toward, purple. True imperial purple, the deep, saturated bladia dyed from crushed murex snails, isn't a product you're allowed to sell at all, past a certain grade. It belongs to the emperor. Not for sale, not for the right price, not if you know somebody. You don't sell it, period. You can dye cheaper reds, you can dye violets that look close, you can sell those all day. But the real thing, the color that actually made Byzantine silk the most famous textile on earth, is the one product the law won't let you sell. Not to the person standing right in front of you, money already in his hand. That is the system, and it isn't a hidden tax or a secret fee. It's an entire category of your own finished product walled off from you by name. And here's the part that proves it wasn't an accident. Go back to that profit cap between metaxapertai. The rich one can't charge the poor one more than a fixed small margin per sale. Think about what that rule actually prevents. It prevents a wealthy raw silk merchant from using his capital to squeeze out every small trader beneath him and slowly absorb the whole supply chain into one private fortune. Stack that next to the 5 separate, legally sealed guilds. No weaver allowed to also be a merchant. No merchant allowed to also dye cloth. And you're not looking at clumsy overregulation. You're looking at a system engineered on purpose so that no private silk baron could ever accumulate enough of the chain to rival the palace that sits at the top of it. The state didn't just tax the silk industry. It built the industry's own internal walls specifically, so nobody inside it could ever get big enough to matter politically. You can get comfortable in this business. You cannot get dangerous in it. So what happens when you break a rule or when the system around you breaks instead? Let's start with you breaking a rule because the penalties are not abstract. Sell purple you weren't allowed to sell. Get caught trading outside your guild's lane. Use a scale that isn't stamped with the Eparch's official seal. The punishment shows repeatedly in this video. Flogged, shaved, and in the worst cases banished or expelled from the guild for life. That punishment happens in public, in the same market square where you've spent years building your name. Your head is shaved bare in front of the same buyers and suppliers you'll need again tomorrow. That is if the guild ever lets you back in at all. Your face is marked and your livelihood is over in a city where everyone in your trade will know exactly why. Now, what happens when the system breaks? In 1147, Roger II of Sicily sends an army against the Byzantine cities of Thebes and Corinth, 2 of the empire's real silk weaving centers by this point. And when his forces pull out, they don't just take gold. The soldiers walk straight past the coin chests and head for the looms instead, counting weavers the way you'd count livestock, loading them onto ships still holding their own tools because somebody gave the order not to leave the equipment behind either. They take the weavers themselves, along with their equipment, back to Sicily and plant a royal silk industry there with stolen Byzantine hands. Read that again. The single most effective way anyone found to acquire Byzantine silk expertise wasn't to apprentice under a master or buy the trade secrets. It was to invade the city and physically carry the workers away. That's how valuable this knowledge was, and how little of a market existed for simply licensing it. So, with guild fees, dye monopolies, flogging penalties, and the occasional foreign king kidnapping your entire workforce, what does an actual year in this business look like? No workshop ledger survives from 10th century Constantinople the way one survives for an English manor. So this is a reconstruction, built from the numbers we do have, not a lost spreadsheet somebody dug out of a vault. In a strong year, your workshop is producing enough mid to high grade cloth to sell several fine garments, each one crossing or nearing that 10 nomismata declaration line, plus a steady stream of smaller, cheaper pieces for ordinary buyers. Set against an unskilled worker's 10 to 12 nomismata a year, a handful of good cloaks alone can already out-earn a full year of common labor, before you even count the volume trade underneath it. Walk the workshop floor at the end of a week like that, and you'll find finished cloth stacked and already spoken for. A runner from some wealthy household waiting by the door to carry a cloak home before it's even fully cooled from the dye. That's an excellent year, and on paper, it looks like this business mints money. In an average year, raw silk costs more because of a bad harvest of mulberry leaves or a squeeze on imports, and your dye costs eat further into the margin. A few of your buyers are slow to pay too, Exactly the kind of customers who always expect credit. In an average year, half the cloth on the floor goes unsold. You wait for buyers who promise to pay later while you wonder if you can afford to wait. That's fairly comfortable, not spectacular. In a bad year, and it doesn't take much, a shortage of raw silk, a political dispute that shuts down a trade route, a rival workshop undercutting you on the volume goods while you're still carrying debt from equipment or dye. Your fixed guild dues don't care. They come due regardless, and the gap between a solid workshop and a shuttered one is thinner than the gold thread running through your best cloak. The loom stands idle because there's no raw silk to feed it. You're apprentice-fed but unpaid, and a guild collector at the door who doesn't care that the shipment never arrived. So, who actually got rich off Byzantine silk? Almost never the person at the loom. First, the treasury. The state didn't just regulate the industry, it was one of the largest beneficiaries of it, taking a cut through fees and controlling the most valuable grade outright. It also used purple silk itself as a diplomatic weapon, gifted to foreign rulers to buy alliances that would have cost far more in soldiers. Below that, the archontes, the wealthy backers who financed workshops and supplied capital. They're the closest thing this world has to silk magnates, though we mostly know them by their function rather than their names. Intentionally so, because the sources that survive are legal codes and guild rulebooks, not gossip columns about who got rich weaving. And then there's Roger of Sicily, who got rich the fastest by simply removing the part of the equation where you have to build the skill yourself. After Constantinople fell to the Fourth Crusade in 1204, that pattern repeated at an empire scale. Crusader soldiers looted palaces, churches, and rich homes for 3 straight days, stealing gold, silver, jewels, silk, and fur coats. Fires during the siege and the sack burned through whole districts of the city. By the time it was over, tens of thousands of people were homeless. Nobody was walking street to street, cataloging which weaver's workshop burned with them. They were too busy cataloging the churches and the treasuries. Italian entrepreneurs, Genoese and Venetian merchants stepped into the exact financing role the archontes held. And the center of the silk world quietly relocated west, to Sicily, to Lucca, to Venice, while the city that invented these rules never fully rebuilt what it lost. You can actually see the fall of an empire woven into the cloth itself. Before 1204, the good stuff is interwoven, the pattern built straight into the structure of the fabric on the loom, thread crossing thread, which takes skilled weavers, time, and money. Nobody in the city had any more. After 1204, artists stopped weaving patterns into cloth. Instead, they sewed cheap thread onto plain cloth to fake the old look. It's gold leaf over wood where there used to be solid gold. Museums today still hold both versions side by side, one empire's confidence sitting a few feet from the other empire's cheap alternative. So could you have gotten rich owning a Byzantine silk workshop? Yes, if you stayed inside your lane, kept your dye legal, paid your dues, and didn't get greedy about the one color that wasn't yours to sell. It could be a genuinely comfortable, even wealthy life. One good cloak already worth more than a laborer's whole year. But it was never going to make you powerful, and that's not an accident. That's the entire design of the 5 walled-off guilds and the profit caps between them. You thought you were opening a workshop. What you were actually opening was one carefully sealed compartment in a machine built to make sure no private hand could ever hold the whole thing at once. The purple was never for sale. The permission was, and when the empire finally lost the strength to keep enforcing that permission, nobody bought their way into the silk business. Somebody just marched in and took the looms.